Welcome everybody, and thank you for being with us tonight. This is our first public meeting on the Transit Service Review. And my name is Kristen Lillyman. I am an engagement specialist with Dillon Consulting, and I will be your facilitator for this evening. I am joined by my colleagues, Tom Pacey, who will be leading us through the technical presentation, and Aaliyah Fraser, who will be note-taking today. From the city, we have Ian Semple, Director of Transportation Services, and Victor Copetti, Project Manager. First, before we begin this meeting, I do want to acknowledge that some things we know, the city knows that some things in transit are working well, and there are some things that need improvement, and that is why we are here today. This is really the start of the process, the beginning of the conversation, and it will not be the only time we are talking to you about this transit review. There will be more opportunities for feedback as the project progresses. With that said, I'll go to the next slide, and I'm just going to do a brief land acknowledgement. So the City of Kingston acknowledges that we are on the traditional homeland of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and thanks these nations for their care and stewardship over this shared land. With tomorrow, September being Orange Shirt Day, I thought it was even more important that we recognize that acknowledging the land that we're on is really only a small piece of recognizing the contributions and the history of Indigenous peoples in Canada and our ongoing learning and progress towards reconciliation. Orange Shirt Day is also known as the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation and is observed annually on September 30th in Canada. It acknowledges the impacts of the Canadian Indian residential school system, honoring survivors and those who perished. So I hope you join me tomorrow in wearing your orange shirt. On the next slide, here's a glance at the agenda we have for this evening. We're going to start, as we have, with welcome and introductions. Tom's going to take us through a project overview and a snapshot of what Kingston and transit in Kingston looks like today. We will have some time throughout for Q&A and discussion, and we're going to wrap up with next steps by 8:30. We'll be using Mentimeter for some questions throughout the meeting. Mentimeter is an online polling tool, and you can use a smartphone or your laptop for that. And if for any reason it's not working for you, you can always put your answer in the chat. On the next slide, just a bit of housekeeping. So please remain muted when you are not talking. If you do have a question or comment, please use the raise hand function or type your question into the chat box. There will be dedicated points, as I mentioned, for discussion and to address questions. If you have a question, please introduce yourself before asking one. This meeting, as you have noticed, is being recorded today. We will post the presentation component. The comments and questions from participants will be used for note-taking purposes only. And just a little bit on my role as the meeting facilitator today. My job is to manage the discussion and make sure everyone gets a chance to be heard. And to ensure everyone's able to participate, I may ask you to think about and raise the one question you most want answered to date. If you don't get your question answered live, or if you have more questions, you can always follow up on the Get Involved page, where Victor is responding to any questions that come through there. Victor is also going to put his contact information in the chat if there is further comment or questions that you have after this evening. And he did that already, so thanks, Victor. On the next slide, some participant guidelines for this evening. We do welcome your questions and discussion. There are no bad questions. I always think if you're thinking it, someone else is likely as well. Be respectful and listen. There will be differences in opinion, but everyone deserves to be heard. And we do want to hear from everyone. Everyone has wisdom to share and experience. The city, again, is here today to listen to your feedback, thoughts, and perspectives, so don't be shy to share them. On the next slide, the meeting purpose for today. So today we want to hear from you on the topic number one is transit service standards. If you're thinking, what does that mean? It's things like frequency. How often does your bus come? Hours of service. So that is it a daytime service, nighttime service, that kind of thing. Routes and coverage. So is there places that you want your bus to go that it's not going? Um, think about the different routes and where you'd like them to go. And then also the second piece we want to hear from you on is the potential for rural on-demand transit service. And we'll go through that later on in the presentation. On the next slide, so I do want to start by acknowledging we have heard some feedback already. We launched this project on the Get Involved page, and since launching, the team has received many comments and questions. Some of the key themes we have heard included overcrowding on certain bus routes, especially on routes that lead to Queen's University, the desire for more frequent service and new bus routes to St. Lawrence College on King Street or Union Street, and increasing service to Westbrook. There were comments around service interruptions and cancellations, encouraging the hiring of more bus operators, and overall, just how service could be improved to better meet your needs.
Hello, everyone. So if we move back to the presentation, we're just going to quickly run through what we're hoping to achieve and what the project is all about. So basically, the plan is here to address the City of Kingston, which is growing, and with that growth, the transit system itself needs to evolve and meet those changing needs of the city. So we're undertaking this transit service review, and it's including that comprehensive review of the existing transit systems, and we're also creating guidelines for transit service today and into the future. And if we move to the next slide, we have our main project goals. So, as we mentioned, supporting the growth of Kingston, modernizing transit options and the transit system. We also want to be forward thinking and community supportive. So, as we do this plan, it guides the system for the next few years. So, we're really thinking about how we can have that forward-thinking view. And we want the system to be robust and reliable. We want it to be user-friendly so that it's easy for riders to use. And we want it to connect all of Kingston, including places like in rural areas and other parts of the city that aren't actually served today. So everything's on the table, and we really want to think about the future of Kingston, how we meet that future demand, and not be limited by just what is happening today. Thinking about the project timeline on the next slide, as Kristen said, we're just at the start. So this is our first sort of phase. We've just launched the project. We're coming and speaking to you now, and we want all these thoughts and information to help inform these later phases that we're going to develop after we do this engagement. So we take all this information from you today and through this engagement period, and we then develop recommendations based on what we hear. Once we've developed those recommendations, we'll come back to you, to the community in the winter, and bounce a lot of those ideas off you. So we'll have a draft network, we'll have some service guidelines, and we'll want your feedback on those recommendations that we've drafted so that then in the spring we can finalize everything based on that second round of engagement and present that to the city. Thinking about this round of public engagement and on the next slide there, what this engagement will help us to do throughout the project, it's helping us understand your experiences using transit. You use it all the time. You live in Kingston. We really want to understand what Kingston Transit does for you and perhaps what you wish it would do. We want to see how you think it can be improved, whether that's just in a way that would affect you or in a sort of general sense, things that you think are missed opportunities. And really, as I said, what we want to hear from you to inform what we're going to recommend, and that will shape the future of transit in Kingston. So again, thinking here and now, how you use transit today, where you have issues, what you think works well, but also thinking forward into what do I want the future of transit to look like in Kingston. So thinking about transit today, on our next slide, we have a quick overview of the system. I hope many of you on this call use transit and are somewhat familiar with the network and the systems that exist today. But even if you don't use transit, here's a quick overview. There's currently 25 fixed route services that operate throughout the urban part of Kingston. There is a service that extends outside of Kingston into Amherst. There's approximately 82 buses at the moment operating this system. Five of them are electric. In 2024, there were 6.4 million trips taken across the system, and there are some changes happening. So this month, the new overnight route N1 starts, and there's also earlier in the year there were enhanced frequencies on some services too. And as you can see on the map there, there's sort of a collection of those more express routes, those higher number routes that follow some key corridors, and then there's a lot of standard sort of local routes that fill in a lot of gaps and provide access off those major corridors. And if we go on to the next slide, it kind of summarizes these groups of routes that you have. So there's those general routes, which are the lower number routes. They typically operate every half hour in peak periods. Off-peak times, some operate every half hour, but some operate up to as infrequent as once an hour. They have regular stopping patterns. They stop at every stop along the route, and they generally provide more local service. Then there are those higher numbered express services. They typically operate more often, so every 15 to 20 minutes during peak periods and roughly every half hour in off-peak periods. They often operate less stops, so they provide that express service and they may not service every stop on a corridor, and that helps them provide access to major destinations and faster, more direct journeys. That new night route N1 operates every half hour between 12:25 and 2:25 a.m. and then also has a 4:30 and a 5:30 a.m. trip. So that's a new service. You may not be familiar with it yet, but there is now a route that does operate through those late evening, early morning trips and provides some access to key destinations. Okay, thank you, Kristen. So, yeah, while it is still early days with the plan, one thing we wanted to think about from the start was these un currently unserved areas outside of the urban part of Kingston. And so these rural areas currently don't see any transit service, and we did a quick kind of initial view to see what it would look like if we provided them with service. So we had a look at the potential for an on-demand service in these rural areas, and for those of you who may not be aware, on-demand is a transit service that only operates on request. It can have a sort of fixed route or a route that it can deviate from, or it can be completely variable in terms of where the vehicle goes. But the core of it is that it only goes when someone requests that it go. And it's not a door-to-door service. It'll only go to designated stops or locations. So it's not like a taxi or anything, but it is trying to be more efficient by only operating when there's a request to do so, and then combining people from a broader area into the one vehicle by going not just on a fixed route, but by going on demand, pulling those people together and then taking them to common destinations. So, based on a quick view of the population and the destinations out in these sort of rural areas, we suggested a model where you'd have an east and a west zone just for operational reasons, really. And from east or west, you'd be able to request a vehicle to come and get you at the nearest stop. And then that would take you into the urban part of Kingston with the sort of projected ridership we could come up with at this early stage. We think we could operate this with one vehicle per zone and now provide connectivity to those parts of Kingston that you can't currently get to on transit. So it's both about providing access for people who may live in these areas and bring them into all the education, shopping, work opportunities in Kingston, but also for people who are in the urban part of Kingston who may wish to go out into those rural areas for whatever trip purpose that may be. Typically, on demand operates using a smartphone app, and it can tell you then when you make your request, how long it's likely to be till the bus comes, and when you're likely to arrive at your destination. But on-demand systems typically also include options to book by phone in case you don't have a smartphone, or sometimes online as well, so that there's multiple ways to access the service. But importantly, it is trying to be more efficient and really catered well to the low levels of demand that we'd see in areas like this. So yeah, we wanted to put that idea out there and see what you and the broader community thinks of providing some access to the rural parts of Kingston with a model like this.
So on the next slide, so first, this is going to be recorded. It will be posted on the Get Involved Kingston page. So if you know people who are not able to attend this evening, please share it with them once it's posted on the Get Involved Kingston page. And also take our online survey, also available on the Get Involved Kingston page. And then stay tuned for future engagement events. As we mentioned, this was the first opportunity to hear from you and get your feedback, but there will be opportunities along the way, future opportunities. So keep your eyes out, and we hope to see you back and telling us more about what you want to see in the future of transit. So on the next slide, it's really just a thank you and how to stay involved. There's a QR code to the Get Involved page. We did hear a lot tonight, a lot of great feedback, a lot of good comments. So really appreciate your time. We heard a lot about expanding service to both the East and Westbrook area. We heard about Route 2, the frequency and connections, and service to downtown. We heard about stop spacing, especially for express routes, support for night routes, and discount passes for employers. Overcrowding, we heard concerns about that and accessibility, and a request for to add more buses to add capacity or longer buses. Definitely recognizing that transfers are a challenge, so efforts to make those more smooth would be appreciated or reduce them. Late buses or cancellations, so reliability is a challenge for some of the current routes. And desire for better notifications of route changes and the accuracy of the transit app. Another comment was around having other ways to pay your fare. So lots of great feedback this evening to inform the transit review. So again, really appreciate your time this evening and all the comments you provided in the chat or through raise hands or through Mentimeter. Please stay involved. Again, this is the beginning of the conversation. Please reach out if you think of anything after this evening. You can always send Victor a comment or have your say through the Get Involved page. So thanks again and have a good evening.